Of all Germany's aces, few can boast of belonging in the same class as the legendary Adolf Galland. His more than 100 victories against Western opponents are a testament to his bravery and skill as a pilot. However, his place in aviation history was earned with more than just the victory bars on the tail of his Me-109.
It was publicized that Uret had an accident by testing a new weapon. Yes, he tested a new weapon, but it was his pistol.
The fates of fighter ace Adolf Galland and Germany were bound together during the start of World War II. Both enjoyed great successes in the initial campaigns. Germany quickly stormed across Western Europe, consuming nation after nation, and Galland became a living legend of the air and a hero for Germany as he added victories to his resume. During the Battle of Britain, Galland took the lead amongst aces and was promoted to the position of wing commander, along with his fellow ace Werner Mulders. But here, Germany's torrid progress to expand its military empire stalled. The fierce resistance they faced from the RAF, combined with the ineptitude of the Luftwaffe's high command, poisoned Germany's conquest of Britain. Hitler turned his attention to the Eastern Front, and although Operation Barbarossa was initially successful, Galland and the Luftwaffe faced tragedy: the suicide of Ernst Udet and the accidental death of Werner Mulders. At this time, Adolf Galland found himself in an unhappy position, as he was forced to take mantle of General of the Fighters from fallen ace and friend Mulders. However, in this new role, Galland would soon find himself in Hitler's inner circle, planning a top-secret mission, Operation Thunderbolt, the Channel Dash.
Hitler had led this meeting by himself, and he said he wanted to have the capital shifts in Norway because he was of the opinion that the English would recapture Norway. And he wanted to avoid this in any case.
For Hitler, holding on to Norway was a key to the success of Operation Barbarossa. If the Allies established a foothold there, then Germany would have yet another front with which to contend. At the time, the region was largely undefended, as troops and aircraft were mired in battle with the Soviets. Sailing his navy, stationed at Brest, to Norway was a stopgap measure to prevent an Allied invasion.
Hitler, he said he knew that this operation would be extremely dangerous, but all his actions in the last years before the war and during the war had been very dangerous, so he was decided to make this operation. The question was only, should the ships go around England or should they go through the Channel? Both ways were really risky because the way around England would have involved the whole English fleet, which was high superior with Navy and also with the Air Force on the ships. So it was decided finally to go through the Channel.
Sailing the German warships through the English Channel might have avoided a direct confrontation with the British home fleet, but it was still a treacherous path. The Germans would still have to contend with British coastal gun batteries, as well as attacks by the ever-alert RAF. The entire operation was a calculated gamble for Hitler.
Hitler had finished. He took me aside and talked to me and said, "Do you believe this operation can be successfully performed?" And I answered my Führer, "This will depend completely from the surprise. The preparation must be taken 100% secret, then it can happen. A lot will depend from the weather, but most will depend from the surprise." And Hitler said, "Okay, this is good. We will go ahead."
Hitler entrusted Galland with command of the fighters for this bold naval operation. His fighter force would play a pivotal role escorting and shielding the German ships from RAF strikes. As well, the German ace was asked to select a name for the secret mission, a decision which irked the proud Kriegsmarine commanders.
One thing which was something ridiculous on the whole story, there should be invented a name for this operation, a camouflage name. And I was asked, and I said Donnerkeil, because Donnerkeil in German means something like, what is it?
Thunderbolt?
No, not at all. But as a wondering, if you know something but you didn't believe, you said Donnerkeil. Donnerkeil, what an operation.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. It means thunderbolt. And the Navy decided not to have the same nickname because they didn't like it. It was invented by a fighter pilot, a young fighter pilot, and they will never take what the young fighter pilot suggests. So they said Cerberus. And it did turn out that the difference in the two camouflage names did work very well. The English side, the English Secret Service, did believe these were two different operations. And this was in favor of us.
Oh yeah, help with the surprise.
Was helpful.
Engaged in a war on the Eastern Front, only about 250 German fighters were available to form a shield to protect the German fleet during its Channel dash. To maintain continuous protection, fighter units of 16 would be sent over the fleet for 35-minute shifts. Training for the mission went on with the utmost secrecy.
The German fighter commanders didn't know what was going on. They didn't know about the escape of the ships. They were informed we would make a limited offensive operation. So they knew it only on the same morning when the ships during the night had been gone out.
On February the 11th, 1942, Operation Thunderbolt commenced under the cloak of darkness. All through the night and into the morning, the German fleet and their fighter escort slipped along the channel unnoticed.
The German fighters had to fly as long as possible in low level in order not to be detected by the English radar. And our commander of the communications, who had below his command the radar organization, he used at the first time a system which did camouflage the fleet and which did give the English impression that a big incursion was coming on. And this system has worked very, very well. English radar was completely confused.
It wasn't until 1100 hours the following day that the British forces spotted the German warships. More than 2 hours later, the first RAF planes, Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers, arrived on the scene. These sluggish British biplanes were soon devoured by the German fighter force.
The first which did attack us were this hopefully inferior biplanes.
Small biplane, yes.
Biplanes. They were very, very brave. They were shot down 100%. The fighters did an extremely fine job at the day.
Wave after wave of British fighters and bombers attacked the German fleet and its shield of fighters. But on this day, Germany would have her way. Operation Thunderbolt was almost a complete success. The fleet arrived with minimal casualties and damage.
Did you meet with Hitler afterwards to discuss the success of it?
No. But I was made general very soon.
That's better than talking to him, isn't it?
Without bringing this together with this operation. Because this operation was only, to a certain extent, a success for the Germans. The passage was a success. But the fact we had to escape from Brest was negative. And
so he didn't want to publicize the fact that they had to abandon the base. I see.
I think we shot down about 60, 65 English planes the day. We had 18 losses. But in total, for me, it was a wonderful operation.
Though a successful military operation, the tides of war would soon turn against Germany. The Channel Dash was meant to safeguard Operation Barbarossa, but the Soviet Union's harsh winter and fierce soldiers proved to be even greater foes than Hitler anticipated. In the winter of 1942, while Germany was embroiled in the Battle of Stalingrad, Galland met with General Jesenek, the Luftwaffe's Chief of Staff, to discuss Germany's grim fate.
General Jesenek, this was a man who, even he was a follower of Hitler, but you could talk against Hitler with him. That was possible. The only of the few people who could do this. We could do this. And when in 1942 we, the Germans, had in mind to make the decisive offensive against Moscow and other towns, Stalingrad and the Crimea. But the weather has not allowed to make a bigger offensive, has delayed these preparations terribly, and the Russians did start their offensive. And in this occasion, all fighters, fighter schools, fighter reserves, what we had, they were closed and everything was directed against Russia.
Against the East, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was used. And I talked to Jesenek in this occasion and I said, this is the end. What can we do next year? And he said, don't take care of this. When we lose this offensive in the spring, the war is lost. So we talked about losing the war, and one thing was terrible. There was the conditions in which the war could be ended. This was the unconditional surrender as only outcome of the war.
To compound Germany's problems, Allied bombers soon devastated cities like Hamburg in massive night bombing raids. They were able to counter the obsolete German night fighter and searchlight system by sending in single streams of bombers and dropping countermeasures to fool the enemy radar.
General Kammhuber was a man who was responsible for the night fighters. And he had his special system. He had the circle of one radar, he had one fighter, and this fighter was leaded against the target. But when Hamburg occurred, and your bomber command did make first this air stream of bombers, together with the strips, with
the window or chaff.
Window chaps. His system was completely out. And the night fighters, also at this time, they wanted to follow the bomber stream in the night because they could see them. Many times they could see them and they saw the signals they were dropping. They saw the burning bombers in the stream. So they could easily follow over the target. Everything was
light because of the fire.
Of course, the fire. Of course, the pharaohs.
Searchlights. Yes.
Searchlights. Yes. And they couldn't understand. They were forced to stay in a circle.
Frustrated by General Kammhuber's ineffectual system, the night fighter force turned to Galland to intervene.
They came to me, and I had to tell this girl. And after Hamburg, when this system with the circles did completely fail, he made me responsible for the night fighters too. I didn't understand very much. I have only some night missions done in the second seat of a night fighter. But I personally have not shot down one aircraft during the night time.
It's a whole different situation at night.
Completely different, completely different. But I had, as my inspector of the night fighters, I had an expert who knew this and who explained this to me. So I think the night fighters themselves, they were more or less happy to be on a mine command. Not so with Kamhover. Kamhover did believe I had originated his replacement.
He must have known that it had failed, though, and because it didn't stop the attacks, and when you took over, things got a lot better.
But that was the only answer to the new British night tactics.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. While the British devastated Germany through the night, the Americans took part in their own precision daylight bombing raids, crushing Germany's infrastructure. Hermann Göring, looking for a scapegoat for his own chaotic management of the Luftwaffe, criticized Galland and his fighter force for failing to repel the American bombers.
I was, unfortunately, present at a meeting when Göring in Schleißheim, near Munich, had a meeting for about 35 high-ranking German officers. And he was upset about the last encounter with the American ACES bomber fleet. And he was blaming the fighter for not performing the escort during the Battle of Britain, not performing now to stop the American air offensive. And he did blame us, and he did call us scopegates, and I don't know what else. And when he said, your people have got so high awards during the Battle of Britain for the victories you have not really made. You have only you were lying on this. Oh. And when he said this, I took my decoration and hit it on the table in front of him. There was a silence, absolute silence there. Even Göring couldn't say any word. And he finished very soon this meeting, took me out and said, please don't do this, please don't do this. I was nervous, and this is not my opinion. And I said, I will never wear it until you extend a declaration that this is not true and this is not your opinion. He didn't do so. So I took all my decorations off, and in my office at this time was in the Olympic game stadium.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
And there was an office, and this was my office for the wartime. I had my part of my trophies there, this wooden cock, the big cock I had there, and I put the last decoration I put around the neck of one wooden cock, a blue, dark blue neck, and I put 2 lights on it. And everybody who came wanted to see the wooden cock with the diamonds, and I showed him this to this. They did fit him wonderfully. So then one day Hitler had seen a photo of mine in a German newspaper on the cover front, very big picture without decoration. And he asked, what is going on? No, before he did this, my quarters was bombed, the Olympic game field. It was bombed, and the decoration and everything, my complete office did burn up. So, and Hitler did ask his surroundings, what is the reason why Galland is not wearing the highest decoration? And they told him that has been burned in the Olympic sporting game. Yeah. By an English air attack, night attack. And she said he should come see me. I have a new set for him. And I went up without decoration, and he gave me number 4.
In addition to the military losses suffered by the Luftwaffe fighter force, Galland suffered personal tragedies, the deaths of 2 of his brothers, fellow pilots Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland and Paul Galland.
This picture down below here, these are your 2 brothers.
Yeah.
And they were both lost in the war, is that correct?
Yes. The little one was killed first. There was a little attack on Canterbury, and he was escorting fighter bombers, 109 fighter bombers. And on the way back, they were attacked by Spitfires. And he climbed into the clouds, and since he couldn't fly by instruments, he came out immediately from the clouds, and they were in the middle of the Spitfires, and was shot down. He's laying here in his channel.
How many victories did he have before?
Yeah, 17.
17.
And he was only 23 years when he died.
And your other brother?
My other brother was 2 years elder. 3 years elder. And he had a very good talent as a fighter pilot. He had difficulties in the beginning, but he was a perfect fighter and a very good group commander. And he had 57 victories in between these 7 4-engine bombers, be 17s. And he was very talented, very good.
He must have been. Those are impressive number of victories at that time.
Very good group commander. He had the Knights Cross also.
With each passing day, the outlook became more hopeless for Germany as they battled the Soviets and faced the punishment of the American and British bombing campaign. But did Galland, a living legend of the air and general of the fighters, believe his pilots could somehow change the outcome of the war?
You may ask me, did you believe you could change the war? Not at all. The war was completely lost. The war was lost when we started the offensive against Russia.
Yes.
Perhaps the war was lost when Hitler started it. Because the Americans, the Russians, and the Catholic Church as enemy, and you are lost. You can be sure. And the British. Oh, sorry.
What kept you fighting after you really knew that the war could not be won?
We were fighting for anything better than unconditional surrender. And we thought there must be a chance, perhaps, that England and the Americans are going against Russia or something like this.
Galland and his pilots also continued to fight to defend Germany's helpless civilian population as best they could from the relentless bombing raids. The general of the fighters believed the Me-262, a jet fighter with a maximum speed of over 500 miles an hour, was the ideal interceptor to counter these attacks.
We had now the first and the best jet fighter in our hands. The terrible attacks of the American Air Force, of the 8th Air Force, the 15th Air Force, and the English Air Force during the night, the Bomber Command, they were going on. The German population, the losses were so high that we couldn't say we don't fight anymore, even if we knew the war was lost. And the chances that we can change anything, they are about zero. Only for the feeling when the population is suffering in such a terrible way, and we have a good weapon, we have to continue to fight, and we did it.
To protect the population, Galland advocated building up a huge reserve of fighters and striking the Allied bombers in an operation known as the Große Schlag, or the Big Blow. By downing as many bombers as possible in a massive strike, he hoped to stall the American attacks, at least temporarily. but Hitler, focused on offense, squandered Galland's reserves. It was the same preoccupation with offense which led Hitler to order the Me-262 to be modified into a fast bomber.
I have fought for the 262 since I had flown it first in 1943. Hitler had a little bit later already ordered this plane should be used as a fast bomber, as a blitz bomber only. And he said, I will fight the forthcoming invasion with this plane. Nobody of you has seen this possibility. We knew that this plane would be a terrible bad fast bomber. It would have been an excellent fighter, especially against the American day bombing offensive with the 4-engine bombers.
Hitler's decision to convert the 262 into a blitz bomber ultimately slowed the development and production of one of Germany's most advanced and deadly weapons. However, this was not the only time Hitler meddled directly with the 262's design.
He has ordered a 5.5 centimeter cannon, tank cannon, to be installed in the Messerschmitt 262. It was sticking out about
Looked like a
3 feet sticking out from the front.
Looked like a swordfish, yes.
Yeah. And when you could only shoot bum, bum, bum. And every time when you made a shot, the plane was shaking like this.
Galland, focused on defending the civilian population, continued to push for the Me-262 to be used as an interceptor. His single-minded advocacy of this cause and his open opposition to the orders of the Luftwaffe's High Command landed him in hot water with Goering.
He finally was so annoyed that Goering extended the order. The plane should never be mentioned as a fighter, as an interceptor. Never. He gave an order not to use this expression anymore. So, and I continued fighting for this until I was replaced. I was fired as general of the fighter arm. This was in December 1944, 5 months before the war ended. And Goering had in mind to make me responsible for the defeat of the fighter arm. And he was preparing a
court-martial.
Court-martial. And Speer, I could manage to get Speer involved. Speer informed about my situation. And Speer, in the same night when he got this message, went to Hitler in his quarter and informed Hitler. And Hitler said, this should be, all actions against Galland should be stopped immediately. For me, it is absolutely clear Goering wants to have a scapegoat. He is giving the fault to another man like he is doing this normally. So it was stopped. And then Hitler extended the order I should set up a small formation and give the proof that this plane could be used as an interceptor. Very well.
Galland's reinstatement as a frontline commander may have been a way for his enemies in the Luftwaffe to hasten his death. As well, perhaps as a symbol of Goering's irritation with Galland, the German ace was forbidden from attaching his name to the new jet unit.
Goering ordered me this formation should not carry my name, should not be named Jagdverband Galland. And he asked me, what do you propose as name for it? I said, JV 44. JV stands for Jagdverband 44, two fours, because it was in the end of 44, and I thought I will never get more than 4 and 4, 8 planes. And also, there's a joke in Germany, a 4 is a Vierer. A Vierer sounds very familiar with Führer. I said, let's now try with 2 Vierer. With 1 Vierer, it doesn't work anymore. Let's try with 2 Vierer.
Galland was able to hand-select the men of the JV-44, including pilots who had taken part in the mutiny of the fighters, men who had supported his reinstatement as general and were critical of the decisions of the Luftwaffe High Command. It was a star-studded group. His top 5 aces had more than 1,000 combined kills.
I could take over as pilots, men like Steinhoff, like Hohagen, Kopinski, and others, which were involved in this fighter mutiny, which had taken place in between. You can have all these men, Göring told me. You can have all these men. And then we have set up this formation in Brandenburg-Brest near Berlin. Steiner was the man who was responsible for the operation and for the training. And we went down to Munich, to the former airport from Munich, München, and we have operated the last 6 weeks from this airport. With quite a success, we have shot down a total of 50 airplanes.
Though the JV-44 enjoyed some success as a unit, they could not stop the inevitable defeat of Germany. However, if the Me-262 had not been delayed by indecision over its role as a fighter or bomber, might it have had an impact on the outcome of the war?
What do you think would have been the effect of having the Messerschmitt 262 available as a fighter 6 or 8, 10 months earlier?
We could have had it. The development has been stopped by Hitler himself in one situation when he said, all developments which are not ready for use in combat during the next 8 months have to be stopped, have to be postponed. This has delayed the further development of the 262, especially of the engines. But they have continued against the order of Hitler, but only with a limited force. And we could have had the 262 available in numbers of about, let's say, 500 up to 1,000 a year before. It was my firm opinion. And with this force being used only as interceptors, we would have stopped the American day offensive. That's for true.
Yes, I've heard that from the American side too, that devastating attacks, and they couldn't stop them. I'm
completely convinced they could not be stopped. And the losses would have been so heavy on the other side, on the American side, that they had to break, they had to finish this. Perhaps they had to go in bad weather or in the night, to the night. But since we didn't have it, it didn't occur. And the result, if we would have stopped the day offensive, would have been negative. This would not have mean we would have won the war. It was too late.
It would have extended it, probably, wouldn't it?
This would have extended the war. The Americans were already in Europe. The invasion had taken place. This would have extended the war and would have delayed the advantage of the Western Allies. And the Russians would have come in from the east more and more and would have occupied more European territories, which would have been even worse.
Much worse in the long run.
With Hitler weighing in on so many key decisions regarding the 262 and the Luftwaffe, one has to wonder how much he was personally responsible for the downfall of the German Air Force.
Adolfo, how much of a handicap or problem to the Luftwaffe was Hitler's lack of understanding of air power and the use of air power?
This was of the highest importance because he did not understand what was going on. Hitler's thinking was only aggressive. He could only follow the bomber tactics. He didn't know what it means, air superiority. He never understood this. What he was saying, his own words was, attacks can only be counterattacked by attacks. Bombs against bombs. Not fighters, not anti-aircraft against bombers.
It's sort of like an American saying that the best defense is a good offense.
Yeah.
Very much the same thought.
But he did this all the time without any reserves, and unfortunately, he was even with his military decision, he was successful in the beginning.
So it gave him a false sense of confidence.
Not all, but
not all, but some,
all.
Yes.
But in the beginning, even Hitler himself, he did believe he could. His orders were also coming with a positive outcome, and this has led to many mistakes later on, in combination with his offensive thinking. Normally, a normal tactician would build the Air Force only under the cover of air defense. But no, not so with Hitler. He built first the air offensive, the bombers, and neglected the fighters.
The chaotic management of Germany's Luftwaffe and armed forces would ultimately lead to her demise. Though the war was lost, Galland was still eager to make an impact on Germany's fate. He attempted to negotiate a deal with the Americans, which would have allowed the JV-44 to continue fighting against the Russians. His proposal, however, was quickly rejected, and out of options, Galland surrendered to the American Army on VE Day. Unquestionably, Galland was a gifted fighter pilot and one of the great aces of World War II. However, his impact as general of the fighters is debatable. Other than the Channel Dash, the only operation he commanded was an unsuccessful attempt to reverse the fates of the fighter force in Sicily. What we can be certain of was Galland's devotion to his fighter force and to the German people. He was willing to stand up to the Luftwaffe's high command, lock horns with Goering, and oppose Hitler for the sake of these two causes. Perhaps these actions speak more to his bravery and valor than the victories which earned him a diamond-encrusted Knight's Cross.
Luftwaffe Gruppen Commander Gunther Rall, the third highest scoring ace in history, led his Me-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s against the Allied bombers and fighters. For Rall, it would be a fateful day.
The eyesight was very important because you could select a superior position. If you see him enough ahead of him, then you select a position where you are superior to him when you attack him. But this is you know, there's not in every flight in every combat it happens. You are confronted unexpectedly, very often, and then you have to do what you can, you know. But if you get the time, for choice, then it's important and a good advantage if you are I who fix him early enough and you can select a superior position. The German people were shocked, not only surprised, shocked when the war started, and you know, they had the time before we got short in fuel, and there were precautionary actions already. It was a very serious situation, and then the war started, and it was a shock for the most of the people. I mean, World War I, when he started, there was hallelujah and glory, glory. Not Second War, because the memory to the World War I was fresh, and all the losses came again to your mind from the First World War. And almost every family lost a member in these cruel wars, particularly Verdun. You know, my family lost two. My father's family lost a boy, and my mother's family lost both in front of Douaumont and Verdun. Certainly, the Treaty of Versailles was a revenge of the French for the defeat in 1870. The French haven't digested this breakdown in 1870, you know, in particular the General Clemenceau. Clemenceau, he was, therefore, when we talk about this, I'm so happy and satisfied that in our days now, the friendship between France and Germany is the important political problem in Europe, no doubt. You know, the war against French was not this intensive air war. The French didn't give very much importance to air power. They had their strategic thinking was very stationary, Maginot Line, you know, not moving. And therefore, I mean, they had on the other side then the General von Manstein, a German, who was a great strategic master in moving war, and to break through the mountains, which never, with tanks, which never expected. So I mean, this is a big difference, and the French didn't have very much importance to air force. Therefore, these air battles we had over England, or in France, or in Russia, or whatever it is, we didn't have this over France. They never had any contact after that with the French. We flew a ground attack or whatever it is, and we are looking around. We escorted bombers, but there was no real engagement with a French fighter force. Romania was on our side. You know, there was General Antonescu. There were the king, Mihai Bravul. This was the young king who became king when his father escaped with a lady. And Romanians were on our side. We were stationed in Pipera. This is close to Bucharest. The Romanians flew German planes, so there was a good contact with Romania, no doubt. And but when we came down to Romania, officially Romania was a neutral country, and where we were ordered, when we, after the Battle of Britain going down, we had to take with us civil cloth also. We were invited at the parade for the King Mihai Bravul. This was the son of the other one. We were invited. There was a parade, and engaged were invited were also American, and during the war, when we had war, the British and Russians. It didn't last very long, and then the Romanians officially joined our side. You know, we went Greek. We just flew down to Athens, from Athens to Molai. The war was over. Greek was. We came down to support the aggression against Crete Island. So there was in Greek, the war was over. You know, this was a question in political circles, not in our military engagement. We were. This was not a question, a very hot question that time. I mean, I'm talking from the horizon and the quality horizon of a fighter pilot who was 22 years old. He doesn't carry any political responsibility, you know, or the knowledge. We were focused to other problems. As I mentioned, we came back from Crete Island to Romania to get new airplanes, the 109F, was a great airplane. And we were rebuilding our units. And as I said, at that time, a lot of army units came, and the army crew, and then our officer came. We talked with him and said, what's going on here? We go to war against Russia. This was a surprise to us and a shock, because the war was solved in the West. You know, nothing is worse than two fronts. You know, we have this in history several times experienced. And Hitler didn't declare the war against Russia out, so he marched in. You know, that was it. Certainly, then in the very last days, he's going to war. Yeah, you know, this was important missions we are called for. As I mentioned, we were in a little gypsy village in northeast Romania, close to the Carpathian Mountains. And when the war started, the Russians came with the DB3 bombers to attack Constanza. Constanza was the oil harbor of Romania. And there was no protection by fighters or whatsoever. There was anti-aircraft artillery. And he was lost, his officer, he got bombed. And then I got, late in the afternoon, the order to go with my squadron down to Mamaia. Mamaia is just north of Constanza. Today is a very recreation center and the tourists and everything. Those days there was nothing. It was a laguna, it was a lawn and one hangar. That's it. We didn't have a telephone, we didn't have nothing. And I came in with my squadron almost at night. And a U-52 came and dropped down the fuel barrels. We had to fill those days over the whole bit by hand. And then the next morning, I went to this anti-aircraft commander, and he told me the whole story. I went down, or he came up by car and told me these few days at the beginning, when they didn't have any chance to defend the oil city. Then I told him, we are here now and protected. And I sent the next morning, in our choice, 2 aircraft out over the Black Sea, 6,000 meters in front of Constanza. This was the only target. And if they attacked, that's the target, nothing else. And the whole squadron was cockpit alert, radio on. And it happened. They reported from the air, they are coming. Then we took off, alarm, take off, and we got them over the sea. They didn't come into the thing. And you could see from land when they came down with a big oil flame, smoke, right on the sea. And this continued about 2 weeks. And the Russians lost about 50 DB3 bombers. But now, we also had problems. When we were out over the Black Sea, the Russians came once with 3 P2 bombers, low-level over the Carpathian Mountains, so they couldn't be detected by radar, and attacked our base from the west when we were over the sea. And we had heavy losses. We lost the mechanics, and very, very important mechanics. My Werkmeister, Werkmeister, he was an Austrian, a Viennese. He got killed. He lost a leg, and was 2 days later he was dead. And some aircraft who were there for maintenance. But as a result, the Russians didn't have a chance and lost too many, and then they stopped that. And then, after that, we moved into Russia, to Ukraine, near Peretserkov, and from there on, the war was fought on Russian or Ukrainian-Russian territory. And it lasted 3.5 years for us. At the beginning, the Russians was not trained, they didn't have tactics, and they have inferior old airplanes, Rata, E-16 from the Spanish Civil War, you know, those types. You know, you could fight a dogfight with a Rata. You know, it turns right on the spot. You cannot turn with that. Yeah, that comes. But she's slow. And then the E-153 biplane also. And those obsolete types. And the Russians lost from July till September, I think, about 7,000 airplanes. But the Russians draw consequences fast and very successful. They got new airplanes, the MiG and the Lux series. They got from the Americans and from the British 1/3 of the Russian fighter fleet in the South Caucasus. 1/3 was Anglo-American origin. Yep. And then they changed the tactics. They learned from the West. The morale was the same as in every other area, you know. We were out to fight, it was an order. We were at war, and we were confronted with a very cruel enemy. You know, there was quite a difference between West and East. I can tell you, I know at least 10 of my friends. They were shot down, buried in on Russian soil, and were killed. You know, the Russian they had these political commissars in their fighting units, and they were the party fanatics, you know, and this was cruel. It was a different mentality, not in the West. You know, the West also, I mean, I'm always a horrible thing, but anyway, it could happen in the West that one guy, the other enemy, leads him, and he's in it happened in a horrible situation, leads him to the next base. It happened. Or they salute each other and things like that. This was not a rule, regulation. There was another rule. Look, in our mentality for a fighter pilot, the target is the airplane, not the pilot. When the pilot jumps out and is on the parachute, it's forbidden. And this was in our pilot's pass. It's forbidden to shoot at parachutes. Certainly it happened. And I can tell you also that pilots came down with a bullet through his head, you know, on the parachute. So he was shot at the parachute. And this was strictly forbidden, but I know, I had a discussion with, well, we shouldn't do that, with Chuck Yeager, you know. He wrote a book, Yeager. And in this book, he tells his missions in the North German plain with the B-51. And there he writes with counterattacks on everything was living. Women, children. And I asked him, Chuck, are you crazy? This is against every international law. Then he said that was an order. You know, I would like to mention that, you know, but this happened, and it was to a certain degree not possible in our units, so against the law. So the mentality about generally, the West mentality is different than the East mentality. I could tell you later on when we come to this point, when I became a prisoner of war, maybe I can just bring it. You know, I was an American prisoner of war, masses of, and you know, you had the machine gun here, Max Snell. Okay, war was over. Then I was, we had a CIA or whatever it was, or the Secret Service, the Americans. In one of the prison camps in the Neckar Valley in Swabia, all the Air Force officers had to come up, and then he read 5-10 names, and the other ones could go, and I was with him, with the name. Then we had a talk by this interrogator, CIA from Secret Service, and he knew my life better than I. He spoke German, he was a German Jew who went over. And then we were selected to go to England for interrogation. And we came to England in the interrogation camp northwest of London. The administration people were British, but the people who interrogated us were all American. We were American thing. It was the first time when I came into this camp, the British officer said, please take off your shirt, raise your arms. I didn't know that. He was looking at that. You know, SS. The SS had tattoo here. Their blood, how do you call it? Yeah. And so this was all things we never knew, you know, came to us. And then I came back in the camp and was sent again. The British asked, they want to have me and Rudel. And so we flew over, or we were flown by a Beechcraft, and no idea where. And right after crossing the border, crossing the channel, we sit in the Beechcraft, he reduced the power. So there must be a base. Looked down, there's a base, landed. It was Tangmere. Tangmere was a British fighter leader school. We were prisoner. Where the Air Force police, this is in order, this is okay, went out of the airplane, and we were taken to the prison. But they left the doors open. I said, Rudel, that's a good sign, the doors are open, they don't close it. And pretty soon came a British smart wing commander. And he said, never forget the words, gentlemen, I'm so sorry, we didn't expect that early. Did you have lunch? I said, no, sir, I didn't have lunch for the last 3 months. It's like, for a secret? I said, yes, please. We were treated as gentlemen. In every aspect, also even in addressing us. Before that, in the camp, Max Snell, and not a machine gun here, you know. This was a big difference. And in Russia, you know what happened in Russia. Yeah? You were lucky when you survived.